Welcome to Tuesday night and another edition of BlogChat. Hi, Tim.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. Oh my gosh. I say this every time. I'm so excited. I'm glad we're here. Everybody please say hello in the chat.
But it's true. It's true.
It's true. It's fun. I mean, we just did this seems like breathing compared to what we just did. So it's like, oh, we're gonna go live for an hour. No problem.
No problem. But it was such fun. I think this is our first blog chat since the summit, right?
Yeah, it is.
What an event. I mean, to me, it was just, I'm still reeling from it. I'm exhausted, but I'm so enthralled that it was just so cool, and I know a lot of our people, feel the same way, but it was pretty awesome, Matt. Yeah. It was a great thing.
It was. I think we're going to talk more about that next week. We did have a lot of fun at the closing party. But I want to just thanks to everybody who came. I mean, we're going to take a couple minutes off and then get back to work. So, Tim proposed that we talk about a topic that I was really near and dear to my heart. So I'm glad we're going to get into it tonight. You asked a question in a blog post a while ago, and we've had some time to mull it over.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we printing?
Yeah.
So you want to walk us onto this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, every time I talk about this topic, I think about the book Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Oh yeah, twice.
Or at least got through. Oh, you got through it twice?
Yep. Yeah.
Amazing. So the question is what is quality, right? Do I have that correct? I believe that was the.
No.
Yeah. And it's, anybody to do a, several hundred page treatise on what is quality, it dives deep, but I find it parallels so much to photography because there are so many different reasons to do photography. Whether it's to, get yourself out in nature, to get yourself out at night, to be with friends, to earn a living. There's 1,000 different reasons, but there's always this overarching idea of quality. What does quality mean in photography? And, you and I, Matt, both come from the film days, and things were very different then. And I don't want to sound like an old man, even though I am getting a bit creaky, but I find I find things have changed. And one of the major things, of course, is that we no longer make prints. But we do have the opportunity to show our work more often or more readily. Mm-hmm. And one is not necessarily better than the other, but it's interesting to think about and to talk about. And so I would say, in a nutshell, the reason right now to make prints is to think about quality, to better our photography, to make ourselves better photographers by making a print. That, to me, I think is the most overarching thing. I mean, we could all say, and I know so many, folks on our workshops and stuff, they'll go and they'll take pictures and they'll put them up in their office, or they'll, put them in their house, or they'll sell them to friends. And of course, those are great reasons. But really, I personally feel making prints makes you a better photographer. Yeah, I really do. And I think the primary reason for that, Matt, is the focus or the attention that's needed to create a print. It is so very, very, very different and so much more involved than just putting something up on a web page or Instagram, or sending it out as a text to a friend, or, sharing it in one of these electronic ways. There's just so much more to it. And that attention that's needed to actually create the print is what can make us a better photographer, because we are paying attention to more detail, which focuses our mind on things that we don't necessarily have to worry about. If it's just like, oh, I'm just going to, throw this up and, send a picture to a friend. Or, I mean, it's like, I'll take a picture of a damn squirrel out in front of my house, and send it to somebody. And it's like, I don't really care about the quality of it, I
Right.
mean, obviously that's a much smaller, that's a very small portion of it, but there's creep, right? It's like, well, where does that end? It's like you do a selfie in front of El Capitan. How far do you go with the process of creating a great image with that? It's like, well, you could just throw it out there, or
Wait
you
till
could,
nighttime, set up a tripod, bring a
yeah,
flash, leave it open for a while,
exactly. And so there's lots of different levels, right? I mean, there's lots of different levels to it. So I'll go on record saying, when you start making prints, your photography gets better. Ooh, that's
just drop that
boom,
bomb.
boom.
Boom. So I'm gonna ask this. Do you remember a point in your life about when you realized that this was one of the ways that you became a better photographer, or it was really vital to you? Was there a moment? Was there a
Yeah,
print?
not so much a print, but the idea that by making prints, uh, by creating prints and running into struggles in the darkroom, it informed your composition and exposure making and need to pay attention to light and timing and moment, because you'd so often end up just polishing it. Or no, that's a bad expression. Trying to make something that's not good into something great, and then you would sit there and say, "Well, why can't I make this beautiful?" And it's like, "Oh, well, yeah, as hard as I try, it was just not the right time. The light was not right. I happened to be in Zion National Park at this one location for this great sunset, and it never happened. And so I'm trying to make it something that it's not. That's a lot easier today in digital to manufacture that. But I think that was the time when I realized, it's like, as I'm making these prints and failing, I'm saying, okay, well, why am I failing? And that just more informed my shooting process.
Right. And then you had, the next question was, what am I going to do better next time?
Exactly. And, I think I think people that tend to get better with their photography, we all go through slumps when we don't get any better, and it happens to everybody, but are the people that are paying careful attention to not only to the process, but to the overall act of photography. And I guess what I mean by that is that it's real easy to say, oh, this image, it's just no good. It just didn't work. And delete it off of your hard drive.
Right.
But if you ask yourself, why didn't it work? Then you have more information going forward and for the next shoot that you're going to do. And so that careful attention, I think, is exceedingly important to becoming a better photographer. And when you're making prints, and for those of you that are listening now, when I say making prints, I'm not just necessarily talking about the act of, hitting print on your printer and having, hitting print on your computer and having a print come out or sending it off. That's just part of it. When I talk about printing, I mean, after making an image and looking at it, your computer, what you're beginning to do is you're beginning to craft that image. Mm-hmm. So crafting it could be in Lightroom, it can be in Photoshop, it could be changing the exposure, it could be changing the contrast, it could be darkening the sky, it could be bringing out the stars, whatever it is. That's all part, in my opinion, part of the printing process. And with the final stage mean hit print or send to printer, and getting the print back. So I'm talking about the whole process that occurs after you press the shutter button. And so to me, that is what printing is all about. Yeah.
I'm now I want to play on the other side for a second, just like to frame this a little bit. I have started using Instagram more lately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've started using it as a means for accountability. I just told myself I was going to shoot a picture every day, and I'm going to
Okay.
share a picture every day,
Yeah.
and hold myself to it. And I was sort of soft announced that I was doing it, right? So on Instagram, the things that I've noticed are the resolution is quite
Hmm.
low.
Hmm.
And because the screen sizes vary, and most people consume Instagram on a screen this size, and
Yeah.
not like an iPad, and not a large screen. And even when you
Hmm.
look at it on a large screen, the image is still smaller because
Yeah.
it's compressed upon delivery to Instagram.
Hmm.
So it has a couple of things going against it that I think kind of feel like the difference between a proper slideshow and using PowerPoint. I'm playing Inception here. I'm going to come back to all this, but like in PowerPoint, you have the data density is so low that you can only put a couple of words per screen. You can't put complete thoughts. You can't put something that single or double spaced type on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper has the
Right.
density, information density of a piece of paper that's 8.5 by 11 versus a PowerPoint screen are very different. And in fact, there's a famous story about the Challenger space shuttle exploding because PowerPoint was involved. They had to reduce the information about the O-rings failing to such a point that it fit into a bullet. And the people who are looking at this warning in a PowerPoint slide were told that the O-rings were going to fail, but they didn't get it because the information was so truncated just to fit on the
Whoa.
screen. So
Wow.
yeah, I learned that from Edward Tufte, just genius
That is
speaker, writer.
fascinating.
Yeah. So bringing that back out, Instagram so that he says he recommends that you do an 11 by 14 piece of paper, two sides full of text and some graphs or data, like, and you could give people more information in 4 pages than you can in a 200-page PowerPoint deck, and they can read it quickly and they can understand it more quickly than you think. And I think that what you're talking about is the same sort of thing, where a print has a lot more data density, it has a lot more richness, it has a lot more nuance to it than you
Yes.
could ever get from the reason that Instagram exists, which is quantity, not quality. Your
Yeah.
quality is your quantity on Instagram.
Hmm. Yep.
And it's not wrong. It's just different, right? And it's not necessarily the thing that will make you a better photographer. It'll make you better at using Instagram.
Yes. And oh my God, there's so much to unpack there, right? I mean, there
I
is.
turned to take
Yes. The thing about making prints to hang on your wall, there's there's several there's several aspects to that demand a much, much, much higher level of craftsmanship.
hmm
Number one, it's going to be in a gallery, or it's going to hang in a place where people will look at it for more than 3 or 4 seconds. Oh, cool. Click next one.
Right.
Oh, cool. Scroll up. Cool. That momentary viewing of the image is so short. It's almost like a nothing. It's just it's a first impression. It's like, whoa, that's really cool. But that has zero bearing on the quality of the photograph. It may show a high quality idea or composition, which is cool, but it does not show the craftsmanship of photography. And one of the things I love most about photography is that it's such an equal balance of art and science,
hmm
right? You can't be just a simple technocrat that knows everything about Photoshop and everything about printing and have boring compositions, because your work's going to suck and nobody cares. Or the other side of the coin is you've got these great ideas, and you make inspiring photographs, but they're out of focus, or or the stars aren't sharp, or and these are things that we should all aspire to. We should aspire to balancing the technical and the artistic together at the same time. And so because it's so resolution on Instagram is so low resolution, and the time that people spend looking at the image is so incredibly short, there is no time to dive into the craft of photography. which admittedly, I've never really considered myself a creative person. I'm like, when I first saw your, oh, no, this is not, I'm not blowing smoke. When I first saw your, your cut paper project, I'm like, oh my God, this cat is so incredibly creative. And it's like, that is not me. It's like, I have the ability to, take a whole bunch of stuff in front of me and go, no, 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 no. That's it right there. That is very different. That is very different than creating something from scratch going, here's a blank piece of paper and I'm going to cut it into a shape and then I'm going to put it on somebody and then I'm going to put that somebody in the night. And that's true creativity. But I don't want you to respond to that because I'm not fishing for compliments here. But
we're going to talk about it separately offline then.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so that I always find wildly fascinating, and it's something that I aspire to. But it's not my best attribute. It's not what I do. But what I am better at is the craft, or not better than you. But what I am decent at is the craft. And so it didn't take it. What's that?
I said I didn't take it that way.
Oh, okay, good. So admittedly, I am, a bit of a curmudgeon on this because, when I used to shoot, 4x5, the craft was exceedingly important. I mean, you had to have the right exposure. You didn't bracket 15 shots, you didn't take, 20 different compositions to get it right. You had to nail the craft when you're developing your negative. If you screwed it up, you screwed it up. And, and so for me, the craft is very important. And while I don't think it's the most important, I think it's equally important. And I personally feel a need, having instructed, in photography for over 25 years now, I feel like that's something I want to bring back to photographers, because I find that the ease of modern photography it's been a detriment to the learning of photographers, for them learning the craft as well as okay. So let me put it this way. It's easier to learn the artistic part of it now because you get instant feedback, right? And you're like, oh shoot, that didn't work. No, let me try this. Oh yeah, that's awesome. So I think creatively, modern photographers are progressing far, far, far faster than we ever did in creativity. But I also find that their craft skills are much, much lower than ours, just due to the medium itself, the digital medium. Yeah.
Every time you're talking about this, one word just kept coming to mind, and I'm going to use my technology: friction.
Oh,
look at that! I
want to pop up like that, man.
I can teach you. I can teach you. No, like the friction is when we were film users. You and I were both large format shooters. The friction required you to never really think that any shot could be a throwaway.
Right.
You never really set up the camera thinking, if it doesn't work out, it's okay. That wasn't a thought that crossed your mind. No. You might have thought, I hope this works out, but you weren't like, if it's throwaway, it's okay. No, because it was so painful to set it up. And I'm not being sentimental about the good old days here. Right. I'm just making an observation about how friction was useful. It made you want to spend time with the process, think about the result, be very deliberate about it, and choosy to care. And at the end of the day, when you process that negative and it wasn't as good as you wanted it to be, you felt it. You're like, oh, I'm disappointed. I was hoping it was going to be better than that.
Yeah.
And these days you can, it's like I have another rabbit hole and I'll come back from. I just posted something on Instagram something happened with my grip in the last year where like I can't really hold an X-Acto knife for 8 hours like I used to. Paper art, but what I really loved about paper art was with that number 11 blade and pushing it through a piece of paper and actually pushing deeply into the cutting mat so I'd get a nice clean cut and dragging it. There's a huge amount of friction in that process. And
Mhm.
it slowed down my blade so that I had time to imagine the shapes that it should make as I was tracing around to subtract these shapes. And I used the friction to my benefit, and I matched my creative pace to the friction that it was. And when the blade skipped and it moved too fast, I felt like I was out of control.
Right.
Now, my grip isn't the same, right? So I have an iPad now, and I opened up Adobe Fresco, and I said, I'm going to make the same shapes. Maybe I'll get a laser plotter or a blade plotter and have it cut the paper for me. But I'm going to make the design because I still have those shapes in me. But what I
Mm.
found was the surface of the iPad and the pencil, the Apple Pencil, it's so damn slick that I miss the friction. It's not like paper. It skates across the surface so quickly that I have to use those same muscles that I didn't want to use to clamp down on it to instead of just letting it drag, it'll slip quickly.
Huh.
Okay, now I'm coming back out of the rabbit hole. Those
Okay.
two things relating to each other, Instagram with the endless glowing. Once you get the hit of like it's a yes or a no, what do? Do you spend time with it? If you're really curious, you'll pinch in and you'll be disappointed that there's a lack of resolution.
Right. Yeah.
And then you let go. And then if you don't like reading descriptions, you just move on.
Yeah.
And that's the whole transaction. When you're presented a print, you may decide to move on quickly, but you're more likely to stand there for longer than the time you'd spend with an Instagram image. And you think about the other end, the person who made the print, their desire is either to be a master craftsman and or to want that person to not move on, to spend some time with it, to enjoy the time it took to think about wanting this thing to be the best it could be. And I think that's where your heart is. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, my overarching goal well, it's kind of complicated, but I would say my overarching goal is when I'm making an image, what I want to do is I want to create a photograph that stands the test of time and will withstand scrutiny
Mhm.
and can hang on a wall and be pleasing for more than zoom in, pinch in, pinch out, move on to the
Right.
next image. And that's my overarching thing. And I don't want to be sound like I'm down on Instagram because I'm not at all. It's a fascinating and wonderful tool that serves a purpose. But there's another purpose, which is making prints.
Mm.
And so, one of my issues with the Instagram platform is it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's so easy to make a decent looking thing on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not that hard. You don't have to pay attention to the craft really too much at all.
Right.
Especially since, talking about night photography, saying something like, well, what happens if I have to mask something out or, blend, some star trails with a blue hour or something like that. Well, to make that look good for Instagram, piece of cake. To make that look good for a print, it could go from a 10-minute job to a 3-hour job.
Right.
And so you're paying attention to, the masking edges, the real true look of a blue hour foreground versus a night sky. And there's no way in Instagram to tell the craftsmanship of that image. It can look just totally fine. But meanwhile, maybe, the masks are off or they're sharp, they didn't, focus it properly or whatever, it's just not there. And so again, it's not to dismiss Instagram. It is to say that when you take that same image and you put it up to Instagram, when you then go a little further and say, hey, I want to make a print, you're going to find that you should be paying much more attention to the subtleties of crafting a fine print, crafting a fine image. And I'm afraid that's kind of what we're losing. And it bums me out, only because I spent so long, working for high quality stuff. Matt,
Right.
I remember taking, my negatives and literally painting chemicals onto the negatives after they were processed,
Right.
selenium toner and potassium ferrocyanide. I would literally paint my negatives. And then I would take
heavy metals and poisons. Yes.
Yeah, lots of them. Yeah, bloody noses and black fingernails. It was my world, And and I would take tracing paper and put it over on the negative on a light board, and I would take a pencil and shade in areas, and then sandwich that to So I mean, there was a lot to the craft to make that great image, and so. Again, I'm kind of weighted towards that. So for you viewers, realize that, yes, I may be more into the technical than I am into the creative, but I still believe it's important, and there's got to be a balance. There's got to be a balance. And that's, I think, the most important thing. Yeah.
It's at the heart of it. What you're really saying is quality over quantity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the part that I think that people need to reach for and have their own answer is why. Like what is photography for? Why do you do it? Right? If you say, what is Instagram for? Instagram's not for photographers. Instagram is for the creators to make more money. It's a corporation.
Yeah.
Where the more users they have, the more ads they can serve. Right? So they're probably not going to build a network that's better for photographers wanting to show off their best qualities. What they're going to do is they're going to build a network that is for people to share images or media and for advertisers to find them. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it's for. And then they have these other things where you can share another thing, but they serve the tool, and it's a business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I just love the reason I was smiling so big was because you were talking about, why are you, I can't remember the exact question you posed, but why do you
for?
Why are you photographing or whatever it may be? And I remember early on, when I was teaching, we would go around to every student and we'd look through their camera and we say, okay, great. Why are you taking this photograph? And people would stumble. They'd be like, it's beautiful. Yeah. And me too, if you asked me that question, I'd be like, it's beautiful. I love it,
Right.
And I thought, okay, so this is the first stage of learning photography. You've got to learn why you're taking that photograph so that you can make a better composition. So it speaks to, if you don't know why you're taking the photograph, chances are the viewer's not going to know why you've taken the photograph either, right? So you've got to use your words and say, I am taking this because I like the height of the mountain, or I like the color of the mountain, or I like the shape. Whatever it may be, but then that becomes your photograph. Okay. So, but then I started thinking, I was like, well, okay. So once you're able to say why you're taking the photograph, I think a more important question is why are you a photographer? Why do you photograph? And I think that informs a lot, right? I mean, so many of the people that come on our workshops are not professionals. They do not need to make money doing photography. So why do you do photography? I think it's a really important question to ask yourself.
Feel free to answer it in the chat.
Yeah.
Or it's over there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, really? Oh, yeah. So, I thought about this. I thought about this long and hard. And I came up with this for my reason, which was very, very telling. And it was the fact that I disdain disorder and it stresses me out, And so I realized that photography was the only thing in my life that I had complete control over. So if it was wrong, it was my fault. If it was good, it was my fault. And so therefore it was the one aspect of my life that I could control. And if, I couldn't control the light coming out, but I can control whether I decided to photograph it or not. And to me, that was like it was a big realization because, I always put everything in the center and everything is always organized, and I'm like, why do I do this? But instead of, tossing out those ideas, I embraced them. because that's why I was really doing photography, because it gave me control over something. So for y'all out there listening, that's a little bit embarrassing, but there it is, but everybody's got their own reason.
That was a
And
deep cut, man. It's beautiful. Wow.
I mean, truly. But what I also realized was that through all my years of teaching was that too many people did photography simply for the affirmation of others. And I think that's a really dangerous road to go down, because you will never be satisfied if you do that. You may get hints of satisfaction, but ultimately you will always be disappointed. And so it's really important for us to focus on the other reasons that we do photography, which is being out in nature. For some people, it's engaging with technology because they love technology. For some people, it's whatever it may be. But yeah, it's huge. And that's another reason that the, Instagram can be so dangerous. I've seen people, attendees on our workshops say they were going to quit doing photography because they weren't getting any likes on their photographs. And it was a measure of their of their photographs. And it's like, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is that when you go out and you're taking pictures, you are fulfilling your soul or having a good time, period. That is it. Unless you're making money from doing it. And that's a whole other story, but and I just can't say enough about that. I mean, it's so incredibly important.
Well, there's a huge science behind that. With there's a lot of books and even scientific papers out there about the dopamine rush that these systems, these networks use to reward people. Like when you see the number of likes go up, there's things that happen in your brain. There's chemistry that occurs that's favorable, and all of these things are gamified by people who are very smart about psychology and how the brain works, so that when you get a comment that's positive, that you get a like. Notice there's not a lot of networks that have a dislike button, right? So like I think YouTube is one of those where there's like a dislike, right? But there's no dislike in Facebook, there's no dislike in Instagram, for a reason, because they're only built around firing those centers that give you the dopamine rush, that make you feel good. But then when it's in its absence, you feel worse and you want that feeling to come back. So that's what keeps you coming back to the system where attention is rewarded. That
makes me like it even less now, But
knowing about it doesn't mean that you don't fall prey to it, because we're literally wired this way.
Mm-hmm.
We're wired this way, and it's being manipulated. I'm not against Instagram, but I'm aware of why it exists. I'm aware of how it works.
Yeah.
And I don't participate in the things that I believe are manipulative about Instagram. I use it to genuinely interact with people that I believe are like-minded, and to discover things that I didn't know existed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and inspiration, I mean, like I'll give you a perfect example. There's so many people to call out from our summit, but one that pops into my mind is Jess Santos, who you had spent some time with out in the desert. Yeah. And I'm just a real big fan of her work, and I had been approaching it from a different angle, and seeing what she did, it made me think. I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. Okay. And so it started to inspire me to think differently about my work. And so, yeah, I mean, I would have never known that if it wasn't for Instagram. And so, yeah, it's a huge and wonderful tool. But you know what? I'm seeing a lot of comments come in, Matt.
I think it's time to share some of the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it seems like some people are talking about some pretty important things, at least what drives them to photograph. And
so let's see. There we go. Michelle says, because it makes me happy. That's one of my favorite reasons for making photography.
That's it, man. That is it. That is so terribly important. That is the root of it. I mean, really, Yeah. So Julianne says, I want to share beautiful moments. And so I would say, Julianne, yes, you want to share them, But ultimately, that, what's even more important is when you're out there experiencing that moment, that should be the true focus.
Right.
That should take up 60 or 70%, and the sharing should be like 30,
Yeah.
You know what I mean, Matt?
Yeah. You couldn't share it if you weren't there, but you were there for the moment. And that is the most important thing. Sharing it comes afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you got to show up ready. So you got to show up with the technique. You got to show up with the tools. So it's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Circle. Oh, okay. So this is a question we'll come back to. That was a tech question.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Sue. Oh, it's so good to see you here.
I do like the adventure.
Yeah. And so again, the adventure itself, which is the moment, which is getting back to being out there. That's the most important thing. And then notice tacked on the end. Oh yeah, sharing is fun. But it's the first thing that I think is, and sharing is fun. But I think the problem, or at least the point that I would like to get across, is that it's the less important of the two.
Yeah.
Because I like to share too.
Well, I pointed out earlier, the reason that I'm primarily using Instagram right now is as an accountability vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a public place where I can post that shows that I'm committed to improving. I'm committed to my path. So that's a reason that I post, and that's a reason that I respond to people who are kind enough to leave words for when I post pictures.
Yeah. And I think that's really wise. I remember I did that, a lot of people did it, but I did the one photograph a day for a year on Instagram. And most of it was on the iPhone. But it kept me accountable. And man, did I learn so much. And this wasn't that long ago. This was way into my career, but it kept me accountable, and it taught me, and it made me learn. So, yeah.
Jay says it's a personal challenge to master technical aspects that most others do not attempt.
Yeah. And you know what? The thing there is, I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to step on you. I didn't know if you had an answer there, but overcoming challenges, whether they be technical or creative, that in itself is fun and satisfying.
Right.
And if that's why you do it, that is awesome. Not everybody's going to say, because I like to look at beautiful stars, and they don't need to. And that's why I like that answer, because it's a real honest look. Yeah. It's like saying, hey, this is what I dig about it, and it's like that enables you to embrace it.
Right.
And really go, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's what I want to do.
I empathize deeply with what you're saying, Jay. I believe that I go out trying to understand more about what's possible. And seeing what's possible with technology, which is imaging, so
yeah. And me too, Matt. I got to say, that's probably a large part of why I photograph as well, in addition to being out. But yeah, if truth be told, I like to overcome a challenge, So.
Yeah. The photographers, I think it's a common thing. It's 50-50. I've met a bunch of people who just want it to work.
Yeah. Because I want to make visible what's there but can't be seen with the naked eye in real time. That is an interesting thing. And I would almost say, Ed, and nice to see you here, man, by the way. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, because I'm commenting on what you said, Ed, but in a way, I think about that as like your vision, showing your vision of the world. So whether you're, standing at the edge of Death Valley in the middle of the day or the middle of the night, we all see it differently. We all perceive it differently. The image that's formed in our mind is informed by our past experiences, our likes and dislikes, and so on and so forth. And so looking at something and saying, this is the way I see it, and this is what I want to share, to me, that's kind of what you're saying there. Make visible what can't be seen. It's almost like you may be thinking, I see this, but maybe somebody else doesn't see it. And so it's sharing your vision with the world, which I think is great. Yeah. Beautiful place, and gets me out there. Plus, I like the challenge of making. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean,
That is a rush.
yeah, and
Out there and making it. Yeah.
yeah, and you know what I think? You know, it goes back to the word muse, right? So what is, again, why do we become excited, or why do we become inspired to make an image? And it may be to share what we see, but you know, Matt, you and I both share the fact that we've done lots of different types of photography, from filming to commercial studio shoots. I mean, my God, I used to photograph dental tools for a living, and so, you know, very wide breadth of what we've done. And
Yeah.
I think that it's important to find our muse. And I know that for me, when I get out into nature, whether it's at night or whether it's during the day, it's like I feel inspired. I feel inspired. And that is what we have to come to, you know? And that's why I think it's so hard for people to make images around their hometown, because it's just like, oh, I've seen all this before, you know? But get them out somewhere new and suddenly, boom, the light bulb goes on. So I think it's important to recognize what your muse is and what turns you on, and, you know, and make that happen more often, whether it is, you know, trying a new thing in your hometown, you know, shooting whatever city lights versus starlight night, you know. But yeah, I agree, Joe. Yeah. I hope he's talking about the conditions we shoot under rather than our personalities, but, you know, I'm just saying here.
That's fun. Thank you.
Oh, Lord. I look for the lines and shapes. Yeah. Sandra, good to see you too. Yeah. But you know, that's an element of composition. So you have to ask yourself, why do those lines and shapes turn you on? You know, that's the important thing. What about that do you find alluring? Why do you want to show that to other people? And I'll take it back to myself again, because I'm oversharing tonight in a huge way. But, you know, for me, when I can organize the lines, that gives me the power to organize the world the way I want it to be. And so I have to realize that, you know, it's a control thing. Yeah, it's a control thing. And so, yeah, it is challenging. It is challenging, Sandra. But I would say, why? Why do you think you're more about lines than you are about something else? So, but I think that's a really awesome start, saying, what am I drawn to? First, finding out what you're drawn to, then deciding or realizing why it is that you're drawn to that thing. And then you're on your way.
So my second keyword of the night, the first one was friction. The second one is noticing.
Okay.
Noticing. And it's no secret that I'm a meditator. But
yeah,
one of the things that you pick up as a habit after being a meditator for a long time is being aware of noticing.
Okay.
Your job when you're meditating, and I'm not proselytizing here, when you're meditating, you're, at least the branch that I do, you're repeating a mantra, and when that gets interrupted by thoughts, your job as a meditator is to notice that and not judge it and just go back to saying the mantra. So like, oh, that happened, right?
Yep.
But what you do is you develop a habit of noticing, and you start to notice things more naturally and perhaps more quickly. So that what you're doing is you're becoming more aware as a practice. And what you're suggesting with photography seems to be in parallel to me, where as you're working on mastering your craft, noticing details that you didn't look deeper into before seems to be part of the act of becoming a master, to achieving a certain level of mastery with the craft. Where I've noticed this learning some of the processing techniques that I use from you, is that what you noticed was very different from what I noticed, despite us being trained similarly and having similar commercial applications during our careers. You notice different things than I did when you're looking to finish an image. And I think what you're saying when you say you should print is that you should really put to practice that final level of accountability of saying, I'm going to be responsible for every square inch of this image.
Yes. Yes. And yes.
And I'm going to train myself to notice what quality is and what I can do to contribute to it.
Yep.
It's a beautiful thought, man.
It is, and I think that again, that goes back to that phrase, careful attention, noticing, careful attention. I think they're similar. And so when you decide, it's not going to take you too many prints hanging up on your wall to notice the mistakes before you start saying, I got to pay more attention to, what I'm doing here when I go to make the print. And then it just floods over into every other aspect of your photography. Just by default, it just begins to happen.
Can I love this conversation. I know we could talk about this for hours, literally. Can I shift gears? There are a couple of technical questions in there about printing. The topic is not necessarily about the technical aspects of printing, but I think some of these are connected to what we're talking about, which is the habit of printing. But it might just be some things that people need to know to help them get some friction out of the way, perhaps. Right?
Yeah.
So how do you decide? That's interesting. How do you check on that craft before printing? If you send files to Bay or someone for large, do you need to do your own printing in-house, or can you proof it on screen?
Yeah. A couple of thoughts on that, and I'm hoping that you've got plenty to add, and I know you do. To answer your question, Ed, I do believe that for simple mistakes or what's the best word I'm looking for things that you may have missed, like say spotting or bad masking, which can happen really super easy in both Photoshop and certainly Lightroom. You can definitely see that on screen, and you don't need to make a print for that. So you just have to train yourself. And, Matt nailed it minutes ago when he said you're responsible for every inch. It's like you take your print or your image on screen, you magnify it to 100%, and then you start in one corner and you just scan the whole screen. Is there any spots? Is there any masking issues? Right. And you just keep scanning it up and down until you've covered the whole entire print. That you can do. The one thing that's a little bit more difficult is twofold. One, the substrate or what you're printing on. Most inkjet printers do very, very well, and they exceed anything you can get from, sending it out, is on art papers. But art papers look very, very different in the overall impression compared to, say, a glossy or a metal print. So you can't really proof that at home. Now, if you're for me, I do not my night work, but my black and white work. I do all of that on a thick fiber, or art paper, like a watercolor paper. And if it's not, I mean, I have a pretty big printer, but if I only had a small printer, I could make a print on that and then send it out to somebody like, Bay or one, and have that same inkjet print made by them much bigger. And in that case, the impression is going to be very similar. But when you're talking about, going from one type of gloss paper to another type, that's going to be a little bit harder to imagine. And that also informs your printing. So when you're printing on a, like say a watercolor paper, the saturation isn't quite as high and the contrast isn't quite as high. So you have to take your file and manipulate it to make the print look better. So it's nothing to make, everybody thinks that, you should, as soon as you hit print, it should just pop right out and be like, oh yeah, that looks just like my screen. No, because, a print this size can be lower in contrast, but when you turn it into, say, like a 20 by 24, just the sheer size of it at that same contrast level will not have the same impact. So you may have to change the contrast level just because you're making a bigger print for the look of it. So there's that, Yeah. But I highly recommend using your inkjet printer to to run some proofs and stuff for sure. Just expect the colors to be a little different and contrast level to be different when you send that out, especially if it's going to be a different paper type.
Yep. Yeah. I agree with absolutely everything he said. The technical side of printing is a long, deep topic. And there's lots of it. Tim, do you have any educational modules that you sell or ebooks or anything that cover that?
I really don't. Once digital imaging became, or sharing digitally became so popular, the interest in printing just dropped, whatever that was 10 years ago or something. So right. I've just, there's not been a market for it. So I've not created anything in eons, but yeah.
I can recommend, if you guys want to learn more about that, there's a treasure trove of information on YouTube from reliable sources such as X-Rite, X-RITE, the manufacturer of the color management processes. They also own Pantone, so they know a lot about color.
I didn't realize
what
that.
else. Yeah, all of the fine art paper manufacturers have pretty good presences on YouTube. So whether you like Hanamule or Moab or whatever, or Ilford, you might go to their YouTube and find the people that speak on their behalf for the things that they have, and you'll find some good information about that. And like Tim said, there's a wealth of papers out there, and that's really personal taste. Steve asked, does proofing on consumer inkjet help to check high quality? Same answer Tim gave. It really depends on the paper. If you're doing a special surface that they do, especially metals and stuff like that, anything that has a high gloss coat added to it, you're probably not going to be able to, quote unquote, proof that at home.
Yeah.
But having a color management system is going to help you. Like make sure your screen is profiled and calibrated. And perhaps you can get ICC profiles from your printer to soft proof on your screen. And that's a completely different topic that I don't even want to get into right now. But soft proofing with profiles is something you can do.
Boy, we need to develop a module on this, Matt.
I think we do.
Yeah, this would be a great thing. But one thing I want to add on to that, what Matt was saying, is that, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion. Now everybody's got different opinions, but for me, home inkjet printing, I mean, the printers have come such a long way. They create amazing prints. But I would say if you're looking for higher gloss or even semi-gloss, I think sending it out to somebody like Bay is the way to go, because the inkjet printers just do not do a good job.
Right.
But I think inkjet printers shine if you want to create work on art paper, on watercolor paper. To me, it's just stunning. And again, you can send that out and have it done at other places too. You don't need to own one. But for those of you with your own inkjet printers, I would say if you're into something glossy, without a shadow of a doubt, send it out. You're going to get a fine, higher quality image, much higher quality image.
When you get reproductions from galleries and they call it a giclée, that's inkjet, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just inkjet on fine art paper. So
yep.
It's the French name for inkjet. Giclée.
That's a mighty PC way to put it. That's not what the French favor, but that's a whole other thing.
Sue asked, I presume you do your own printing. Do you print a small test shot first, or have you done enough prints to know that when you look at your final image, it will print exactly as you see it?
Oh, that is such a good question, Sue. I think there's oh, wow, that's such a great question. I'm just getting so excited about printing again. I'm looking over at my printer. I'm like, man, I got to break this thing out. I haven't made prints in ages. There is a difference in the way that we perceive a smaller 8x10 print than we do a 16x20 print. So it's just has to do with the way that tonalities are perceived when they're larger and spread apart. So I'm a firm believer in that just because you have a solution for an 8x10 print, as far as, contrast, and mainly I'm talking about contrast here, but it is not going to be the same solution for a 16 by 20 print because they're going to present differently at a different size. So for that matter, and the matter of sharpness as well, instead of actually making a small full-size print of the entire image at this big and then saying, okay, I'm going to just bring it up to 60 by 20 and hit print, I recommend taking that 8 by 10 print and printing a section of the image as it would appear at 16 by 20. That's going to help you get a much better gauge of the sharpness, which is exceedingly important when you enlarge. But it's also going to give you an idea of the tonalities. And so I always try to pick a section of the print that maybe has some real deep darks and some lighter areas and see how they come across. So yeah, I'm a big fan of taking a chunk out of it and printing it life size on a smaller piece of paper first.
That feels like I was born out of the frugality of the darkroom era.
Yeah.
Test strip, anybody? Oh.
Exactly. It's a test strip, right? Yeah, precisely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little encouragement. Here's your dopamine hit, by the way. So you need to post more to your black and white.
Thank you, Katrina. Yes, I know. I've strayed so far from my roots. It's incredible. You know, I love color, but I love black and white more. And it's the one side of my artistic or my creativity that is taken a hit as a teacher, because so few people really do a lot of black and white and they want to learn color, that I end up creating so much color work for examples and for teaching. And so thank you for that, Katrina. It's a good reminder to get back to my roots and and start really creating things that I like. Thank you.
So Tim, I think your topic tonight and what you've said have resonated with me. I'm thinking of adjusting my commitment that I've made to, like I said, I'm going to shoot a photo a night, share a picture a day. Maybe I'm going to change it. So I change what I'm focusing on from, instead of quantity, which I wasn't really aiming for quantity. I was aiming for building the creative habit again, into a print a week.
Yeah. A final image.
And set aside the other things which might distract from that and have the singular goal of one print per week.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Would you join me on that?
Would I join you? Oh dear. A commitment.
Anxiety. I put you on the spot.
I know, I'm starting to sweat already. Can you see I'm beating? I think that's a really good thought, Matt, because when you say I'm taking a picture of a day, what that allows you to do, or what it forces you to do, is focus on creativity and looking and seeing everywhere. No matter what you're doing, you've got to look, you've got to see, you've got to make an image. And that's one skill. But then there's the other skill of saying, hey, I'm going to craft something. I'm going to craft one thing. And once a week. I think that's awesome, man.
So no commitment.
What were we talking about? What were we talking about?
We'll talk about it on Slack.
Well, maybe, yeah. Okay. So I won't commit to it, but what I will say is
trying not to shame.
But Katrina has now got me going. It's like, I'm going to, maybe I'll try to do something like put up a black and white image once a week to my black and white feed.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it.
Oh man.
Wow. What the best part about this is? Yeah, it was a great conversation. We didn't even look at the blog post once.
No.
So by the way, if you guys want to read the blog post that inspired this, I'm just posting it up in the chat right now. Yeah, Tim, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think that we should do this more often.
I agree. And it's also kind of put a little fire under my butt to start thinking about creating more education for printing and making prints and making that available to our folks. Yeah.
Well, I find the creative process in me has been stimulated. Honestly, it started I think I was doing okay, but it really started the angle at which I was progressing as a creative person only increased as NPAN happened. I mean, as we grew. I think I've hanging out with you guys and spending time with our attendees and our extended family now has really helped me reach deeper and enjoying the process. So
I agree. And I think it's important to note that yeah, Steve, you're right. We need an ebook. That's a good idea. I think I'm going to put that in there. I think it's important for the folks listening to realize that people come to workshops and they get inspired and they're hanging around with other photographers, and that's their it gives you the ability to learn more and engage in the craft. But really the same thing happens for us. We get that same thing from being on workshops. I get so inspired by other people's photographs and looking at attendees' work and going, oh my God, that's brilliant. I should have thought of that or this. And so, we get the same stuff, we get the same exact stuff. And that's exactly what Matt just said, the inspiration. So,
Yep. So I felt like committing like right on the spot, but you didn't commit. So I don't know, man. I don't know. No pressure.
Okay.
No.
One black and white image. One black and white. I'm committing. One black and white image.
Okay, you're committed. Oh, good. Good.
All right, I'm good. I can do this.
No pressure. No pressure.
I can do it.
No pressure that isn't good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And me, I'm gonna do a print a week. I might still post, just to keep myself up there, but really I'm gonna shoot the print now.
Well, again, I think, just to circle back to kind of where we started, for me, it is important to actually make physical prints. And that's a whole other topic. But for me, basically, folks that are listening in, when I'm talking about printing, I'm talking about the whole process. So everything I've been talking about tonight is just saying, here's a capture, what happens next? And to me, that is printing, whether it's working in Photoshop, working in Lightroom, posting to Instagram, a final image that's high quality, or making a print. It's all good. It's all paying attention, careful attention. And as Matt said, noticing things. And so good on you, Matt.
I just thought of the title for our new course, Tim.
What is it?
From Thought to Dry.
Ooh, dry, but our prints aren't wet anymore.
No, it's a pun that only old people like us would get.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you got to be crotchety to get that one.
So you mean the kids won't get it when I say from shot to dry? Oh,
you're an old man, Matt. But I get the joke.
I mean, I know that there's a difference in our age, but it's not what you think. I've got all the white hair, and you don't.
Hey, let's wrap this sucker up, Matt.
Okay, that's right. So everybody, there was a great chat tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. We didn't get to respond to each and all of every of them, but wow, thanks for telling us about your creativity. Tim, thanks for the thought starter tonight.
Yeah, man, it was great. Yeah, I always love talking about this stuff, Matt.
Yeah, me too. So have a great evening, everybody. We will see you. There's a good Instagram live this week. Gabe will be doing a live shoot.
Oh, that's right. In New York, right? In the city, right?
Yep. So tune in. Is it tomorrow? I'm just taking a look. Tune in tomorrow-ish on Instagram for Instagram Live. I'm looking for the stuff and the things. There it is. Ooh, yeah. A live night shoot, February 24th, tomorrow at 8 p.m. So tune in our Instagram for that. I love it when Gabe does live shoots. I really wait till BlogChat, gets on the road, man.
Amazing. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah. Yeah. So enough of the good long goodbyes. We're gonna have a good night. You're gonna have a good night. Thanks for being here, everybody.
thanks a lot for coming out, folks. We appreciate it.
Bye.